Heads or tails? Not a really thrilling decision to make, was it? Video games have always had a long history of placing decisions in the player's hands. Going all the way back to the original Super Mario Bros. Where you and your sibling would fight over who gets to be Mario, to current day RPGs where the fate of the world rests on whether or not you had fruits or cereal for breakfast, decisions have always been a cornerstone to gaming. I'm going to be breaking down 3 different games that do it successfully and 3 different games that kinda crashed and burned on the way to achieving that. So sit back, stay hydrated, and most importantly, I hope you all enjoy. Right off the bat, one of the most important things that makes choices meaningful is motivation. The game needs to establish why you, the player, needs to care about the stakes in the first place. Rogue Trader is a game that does a fantastic job at doing exactly this. The game is an RPG based in the Warhammer 40k universe where you basically play as Jeff Bezos in space. Right before the game even starts, you're already setting down who your character is and by extension, what motivates them as a person. For this example, I've made Valeria von Valancius, a psyker that's just a little bit of a religious zealot. After finishing character customization, she's introduced to one Lord Captain Theodora von Valancius, the rogue trader herself and the head of the von Valancius legacy. You are one of many candidates to be the next heir, and you were called here to see how well you would fit for the role. Throughout the entire tutorial, the game will constantly probe you for what kind of character you want to be. Do you respond to one of the other candidates with a beguiling respect, or do you act boldly and brashly to try and embarrass them in front of your benefactor? At this stage of the game, I'm already taking the opportunity to insert myself into Valeria's shoes as she sings the praises to the Emperor's name. But to really highlight how the game speaks to the player's motivations, I'm going to jump to the major choice you get to make at the end of the first act. For a little bit of context, you've been trying to get to the bottom of a demon cult that's been slowly digging their claws into the planet. Right at the cusp of you taking them down, the cult shows their true hand as an army of demons begin to teleport all across the planet. Realizing that the situation's completely borked, you and your crew start retreating back to your ship only to be intercepted by a Chaos Space Marine. If any of you guys have been playing the new Space Marine game, you know these guys mean business. After narrowly defeating him and finally returning to your ship, things go from disastrous to downright apocalyptic as Dark Elves swoop in and steal the sun! Yeah, that's just something that they can do. And now with everything being screwed beyond all imagination, you're left with a few options. Do you try to go back and save as many people as you can despite the risk of them being tainted by chaos? Or do you try to prevent the entire planet from falling into chaos by essentially nuking everything from orbit? Or do you just cut your losses and leave? This choice always gives me a moment of pause every time I get here. See, I imagine Valeria to be someone who truly loves the Imperium and does everything in her power to save the ones that she can manage. The problem is, she's fully aware of the corrupting powers of the warp. Even though these people haven't done anything wrong, she just can't take that risk. And so, she fires the missiles and boom goes the planet. She's no hero of the Imperium, no lives were saved. But at the very least, millions of souls weren't sacrificed to the Chaos Gods. And the game is filled with these kinds of choices. The universe of Warhammer is one where being a good person is ultimately a road filled with hardship. The game is now asking you, the player, if being good is enough of a motivation to stick to the good guy path, or if you just want to make things a little bit easier and start listening to the warp. But as good as Rogue Trader is at setting expectations, let's now go to the opposite side of the spectrum and look at a game called Life is Strange. This is an especially frustrating game for me. I'll admit, I did enjoy playing the game back when I first got it all the way back in, 2015? Fuck. Anyway, Life is Strange is a choice-based game where you play as Max, a teenage girl who likes taking photos and being all artsy. One day when you're in the school bathroom, you witness a, illegal discharge of a firearm. The shock of the moment causes Max to discover that she has time powers, and with the knowledge that you have previously, you save the girl's life and you realize that she's your childhood friend, Chloe Price. The rest of the game is a mix between a mystery and a coming-of-age story where you help Chloe find her missing best friend, Rachel Amber. Sounds like a fun and interesting game, right? Oh, I wish. The biggest issue with the entire game is the motivation that it tries to give to the player, which is Max's relationship with Chloe. Chloe. Oh my god, Chloe. This character is nothing but an absolute parasite, and everything about her just poisons this otherwise enjoyable story. How am I supposed to care about the plot when the entire lynch point is centered around an actual crazy person? Take any slice of your interactions with her in the game, and you'll find a laundry list of criminal and immoral activities. In one instance, she tries to steal money from a charity for the handicapped. In another, she gets really mad at you and tries to manipulate you into feeling bad for answering a phone call? And let's not forget the fact that she shoots a man's dog and kills him too! Chloe is an egotistical, selfish, irresponsible nightmare of a person, and the game repeatedly keeps trying to push this narrative that you should care about her. The stupidity culminates in the final decision you make in the game. Apparently, Chloe dying in the school bathroom was supposed to be a canon event, and preventing that is causing an ecological disaster to hit the town that you're in. The game then has the gall to ask you if you want to let the town die, or to go back in time and let Chloe die. Obviously, I went back in time to let her die, because who would decide otherwise? This is a textbook example of what happens when a game absolutely fails to properly set the player's motivations. At every turn, it feels like the game is punishing me for not acting according to how it wants me to play the game. It's nothing but absolute torture. Humans can do a lot when they're motivated by the right factors. For example, you guys can help me get to 1,000 subscribers by leaving a sub below. But motivation isn't the only factor that makes choices in games interesting. In fact, all the motivation in the world isn't going to be enough if you don't have enough variety. One of the most boring ways to implement choices in a game is by limiting them to just a binary set of actions. This usually just boils down to picking good guy choice or bad guy choice, with very little nuance in between. This kind of approach to choices typically means you're only ever going to pick one option until you get to the ending. That lack of variation makes it both predictable and, frankly, boring. Out of many games that have come out recently, one game that stands head and shoulders above the rest in this regard is none other than Baldur's Gate 3. Being a game whose mechanics are derived from Dungeons & Dragons, BG3 has a heavy set of expectations on its shoulders. Going from tabletop to video game, it inevitably has to sacrifice some amount of freedom in order to tell a coherent story. But even with that in mind, the game absolutely blows most games out of the water by giving the player a plethora of ways to deal with problems as they come by. Not only does the game give you the option to play your character according to the morality that you prefer, the stats that you choose can radically change the outcome of several interactions within the game. It's not even just that. Your choice in class and race can give you unique dialogue options, further expanding how unique your playthrough can be. Hell, if you pick one of the preset characters, You can even experience what would be their companion quests from your own perspective, while having access to specific endings that are only available when you play as them. Needless to say, you can play Baldur's Gate 3 dozens of times over and you'll find several new things to discover with each run. One of my favorite instances of this in the game is how you deal with the Goblin Camp. At a certain point in the early game, you're given the quest to help a Druid Grove deal with the local goblin problem. Coincidentally, these very goblins may also have an idea on how to help you with your, passenger problem. Arriving at the very camp, you're now given an absolute buffet of choices and how you deal with this threat. Of course, you can always just run straight in and kill everyone, but if you decide to enter incognito, there are so many things within the goblin camp that you can interact with. You can go out of your way to save a baby owlbear so that you can have him at your camp. You can secretly poison the goblins' alcohol so that you can thin their numbers, and in one instance, you can speak with a goblin with a really specific preference to you kissing his big toe. If you choose a specific origin, you can oblige his request and then immediately bite his toe off. It's a pretty funny outcome. And all this is just scratching the surface. Once you actually get inside, you then have to actually deal with the leaders of the Goblin Camp, which all have their own unique ways of being dealt with. You can even choose to spare one of them, who will then go on to become an optional companion. Of course, this is entirely assuming you decide to help the druids in the first place because, yeah, you can just decide to join the goblins and completely eradicate the grove. BG3 is an absolute masterclass for how fun games can be as an interactive medium. When there's so many ways for you to enjoy the game, it just naturally encourages you to mess around and get silly with it. But games don't always get this right. And if there's one game that absolutely frustrates me in this regard, it's Fallout 4. This section isn't going to be very long because there really isn't a lot to say about this game's roleplay options. Yes, the gunplay is fun and I could get lost doing the base building for hours, but the actual choices that you get to make in the game, they're so boring. The choices in this game just ultimately amount to yes, yes but with an attitude, yes but later, or no. There is very little that you can do that makes a run unique. Once you've played the game once, you've practically finished a majority of what it has to offer as a story, which isn't even all that interesting in and of itself. It's such a shame that this is the case when it shares the same name as Fallout New Vegas, a game praised for its ability to do the very thing I just complimented Baldur's Gate for. Like I mentioned before, games are supposed to be interactive. That's really what sets it apart from any other medium. It inherently requires the audience to be a part of what's happening in one way or another. Giving the players choices does so much to expand on that experience because it gives players another avenue to express ourselves. It hurts me so much when a game doesn't commit to it because at that point, you might as well have just removed the choices altogether because there's just nothing to mess around with. And speaking of messing around, there's only so much of that you can do before you find out. And this is where I'd like to talk about consequences. More than motivation, more than variation, consequences are what cements your choices and makes them feel real. There's really nothing more disappointing than a choice that doesn't actually affect the story in any meaningful way. It turns into a promise unfulfilled, and it tends to ruin the experience. And there's no game that encapsulates this more than The Walking Dead Season 2. Where do I even start with this game? To call it a disappointment is kinda putting it lightly. Season 1 was such an emotionally charged masterpiece that the stark drop in quality between both games just stings so much more. I really wanted to like this game. I really did. I wanted to see how Clementine's story unfolded after losing Lee as a father figure and finding out how she would survive in this world without him. The game starts off fairly promising, with Clementine surviving along with Krista and Omid, but things very quickly turn sour when another discharge of a firearm happens in a bathroom. If I had a nickel for every time this happened, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Now, I wouldn't be too upset if this was just a one-off event. After all, this is a choice-based game, so our choices in the future will surely decide who lives and dies, right?
Nick! No!
Don't shoot!
Right. Every single time the game gives the player the choice to save a character, it will always get revealed that whatever you chose never mattered because the character will immediately lose plot relevance and then die anyway a short while later. And there's no moment in the game that frustrates me more than how Luke dies. Luke was a fairly alright character. He's one of the only people in the group that's actually level-headed and shows any sort of sympathy towards Clementine. Near the end of the game, the group has to cross a frozen river to get to the house on the other side while being chased by walkers. The ice underneath Luke starts to give way during the commotion, and you're given the choice to walk up and help him or to cover him while he tries to save himself. No matter which option you choose, Luke is going to die in this circumstance. If you choose to go up and help him, the ice breaks underneath the added weight and he drowns. If you decide to hang back and cover him, Bonnie will decide to walk over. The ice then breaks underneath the added weight and he drowns. There's no winning in this game, and it's just so tiring. At the very least, the final choice in the game does present you with different endings that fundamentally change the next season, right? Right?
I got it! Turn the wheel!
Don't! AJ? Oh God, you're okay.
I guess I'm really just asking for too much. Having different outcomes to choices is a lot of work to ask from a dev team, and it's not like they can always deliver. But I wish there was a game that really cemented the importance of the choices that you pick. Wait, what's that?
A revolution is knocking on Gotham's door. When this whole thing starts, make sure you're on the right side.
Yeah, it turns out that Telltale's does know how to write a good story that has real choices. The way that they interpreted Batman's story is honestly such a refreshing and fun take on the character that asks you, the player, what kind of Batman do you want to be? Are you going to be the legend created out of nightmares that terrifies both the criminal world and the public at large? Or are you going to be the hero that shines a light of hope for Gotham and its citizens? Not only do you have to face that, but you also have to juggle the different relationships Bruce has with the people close to him. Harvey, Selina, Alfred. The game does not hold back on shining a light against you depending on how you treat these people. But as amazing as Season 1 is, I want to focus more on Season 2, as that has the most interesting relationship out of all of them, and that relationship is the one between Bruce Wayne and John Doe, Batman and the Joker. Unlike his other interpretations, John is just a man who craves guidance. In other showings of the character, Joker is nothing if not confident. He knows who he is, he knows what he wants, and he knows what he's willing to do. The John we meet in this game is a meek guy who just wants to make friends. He laughs when he's nervous, he lacks the ability to read social cues, but at the end of the day, he does mean well. It's Bruce's interactions with John and how he treats him throughout the game that ultimately molds him into who he is at the end of the game. Will he be the Joker that we all know and hate? The clown prince of crime who will kill people just for the fun of it? Or will he be something else entirely? And it's the effects of your choices in both of these games that have left such a profound impact on me and why I still remember them fondly after all these years. At the end of the day, games are an extension of us. Having choices that reflect who we are allows us to connect to them in a way that can't really be replicated in any other medium. That's what makes them impactful, and that's what makes them fun. And if you guys want to experience the pure fun of games, check out this video over here, or you can listen to a whole playlist of me talking about more games over here.